Hello, I'm Toycat, and the Human Development Index, or HDI, is a UN-recognized measure of combining together life expectancy with education and a decent standard of living to make a score which goes between 0 and 1, 0 being the worst, 1 being the best, and of course Wikipedia has taken this and they've listed them out, showing us that the very best country in the world to live in is Norway. However, it's a bit of an unfair thing to do this by country, because there are some very sad villages and towns in Norway, whereas there's some very prosperous states or areas in places like the United States and Australia, and so today I figured why not show you this map, which actually takes it on a region by region level and actually shows you what the best places on Earth to be born or to live in are as far as actual regions, not taking a whole geographic mass, but instead saying that yeah, if you live in Australia is great, but you know the best place to live is? It's either the capital region of Canberra or it's Western Australia, at least according to those metrics. Yeah, New Zealand might be a wonderful, it's heaven on Earth, however, in reality, the most developed region is actually the capital region around Wellington, it seems. The same is true when you look around Europe. There are very few places that meet these very high standards of greater than 0.95 or greater than 0.96, with notably a few exceptions in the north and center of Europe right here. And yeah, if we go to the even higher measure, which just to remind you, greater than 0.95 means even these few places are greater than are only beaten by 3 countries, Switzerland, Ireland, and Norway. But if we go to the blue measure, these are greater than any, this is a better place to be born than anywhere else on Earth, and it only really includes Stockholm, Copenhagen, Dublin in the southwest of Ireland, London, I think that's Baden-Württemberg in Germany, and then the 2 places I mentioned in Australia, as well as a few other tiny towns across, or city areas across Europe. There are very few amazing places to be born, and this is a kind of fun reminder that yeah, we live in a world that is very big and very vast, but as far as top tier spawn locations go, we still have surprisingly few. We have a long way to go, and even though every year the HDI index for pretty much everywhere on Earth is growing, the darker blue places are growing the fastest, it's a fun reminder of that. And this is, by the way, a good introduction to a video about maps, which I'm going to be showing you, which provokes some amount of thought from me, because I feel as though a lot of maps are great at just showing you very simply, these are the good countries, these are the bad countries, dark blue countries, they're getting good, red countries, come on guys, get your stuff together. But these maps are a little bit more interesting and maybe a little bit more complex, like this one, because this shows you the one place in the world where elections don't need to have any complexity to them, because in North Korea, 100% of the electors in every single region vote for Kim Jong-un. This is actually a nice reminder that we live in a world that's actually very peaceful as long as that world is in North Korea. Again, the metrics which show dark blue areas actually missed out North Korea because it's just so well developed on this map, and obviously this map is just a reminder that like, oh yeah, getting data, even though most countries are somewhat part of the global economy, maybe fewer countries this year than last year, even though a lot of places are part of the globalized economy, there are still some places that are kind of off the grid and where finding out actual data is as much guesswork as it is fact work, because what does this tell you about politics in North Korea? Probably not as much as this map does, because this is a map of all of the world's nukes. This has suddenly become relevant again. Does anyone know why? Could you let me know in the comments why nukes have come up a bunch recently? I feel like I've just missed it. Is there a reason that nuclear conflict is more likely now than before? Anyway, so if you look at the map of world nukes, the headline figure is, wow, between Russia and the United States, not only are there enough nukes to blow up every city with greater than like a 15,000 population in the world, but there's enough to bring the whole world into catastrophe, and so really the other countries having nukes are just there to join in on the party and have some fun. However, this is the one area where North Korea is at the very bottom of the spectrum with fewer than 10 nukes. It's suspected to be somewhere between 0 and 10, just enough nukes to be a deterrent to anyone trying to invade, but no actual nukes to maybe stage an offensive war, like you might be able to if you were, I don't know, Russia or the USA. But also, you can see that like, ooh, yeah, there's probably more countries than we want having nukes. It's meant to be officially 5, China, Russia, France, the UK, and the USA are the only sanctioned countries to have nukes. However, it seems as though a lot more countries are getting their hands on them, and this can only be a good thing, right? This is a thought-provoking map because it reminds you about as nuclear weapons go up, so does there's a one-to-one correlation in the increase of nuclear weapons and the increase of human development, and therefore we can easily move on from that to the next map here, because this is Russia's unfriendly country list from 2021. I don't know what the Czech Republic did to get get on there before, but clearly the USA is on there too. However, Russia just expanded their unfriendly country list to include all of these areas. And although this is, on the surface, a map of countries that Russia is mad with because they did something to upset them, maybe. By the way, why did they put Ukraine on the list? Like, surely even if you're Russian, you'd have to admit that Ukraine is somewhat justified in their defense of whatever. We'll ignore Ukraine, but you can see that this really kind of tells you the Western security alliance to some extent, right? Looking at a map of NATO only tells you the countries that are like, with some legal paper and some military integration defined to kind of work with each other. But these are the countries that share that Western military world order, whatever you want to call it, but like have this general agreement about what should and shouldn't be done. Whereas every other country is like, yeah, I would like it if the world continues to work for me, but, what's happening over there, kind of not my problem. And, yeah, that's notably, this is, it's not just countries, it looks like it's like, so Europe, North America, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, the close allies there, and then all of Australasia or Oceania or whatever. But, notably, there's some holdouts in Europe, like Moldova, like Serbia, like, for some reason, Bosnia. Why is Russia not putting Bosnia on their list? Or Kosovo? I guess Russia probably doesn't recognize Kosovo. Speaking of place, you know what? You can't call a place unfriendly if you don't recognize it. That is a useful pro tip. Anyway, speaking of useful pro tips, actually, why is Taiwan on this list then? That's my real question. How can a place be unfriendly if it's not even a place? Speaking of places that aren't unfriendly, this was a map that shocked me. This is from Statista and the Pew Research Center, and I almost didn't believe it, but this is, they polled people as to the countries which lay claim to a neighboring country, basically saying which number of people agree that there are parts of neighboring countries that really belong to us. And my God, obviously Russia makes sense at 53%. They really do believe that some parts of Belarus or maybe Georgia or maybe Ukraine, depending on who you ask, maybe even Estonia or Latvia, kind of are just Russia but outside of their borders. And when you look at the UK, it's 23%, which I do wonder if that's referring to Ireland or what's going on there. But if you look at France, that kind of maybe makes some sense. Or does it actually? Italy's at 36%. Well, yeah, they were robbed of the. Actually, wait, was it? I think which way around the South Tyrol region ran. But you can understand okay, there's historic misgrievances. Poland literally did have a lot of its land taken by neighbors to the east. So okay, 48%. But come on, guys, what's with 46% over here? What's with 67% Hungary? I mean, or is that's Hungary, right? Yeah. What's with 67%? Which country are you trying to claim? Do you want some of Romania? I think it is Romania. Maybe a tiny bit of Serbia too. But yeah, just a reminder that lots of countries do want slices of neighboring countries, but still aren't going for it. And good job, guys. Or maybe not so good job. Maybe just bad job to the list of unfriendly countries. Just a reminder. These guys are the problem. I just want you to all remember that. Definitely no one else who is a problem. Speaking of people who are problems, this is a really... this is so simple. On the surface, it's just, oh, yeah, that's quirky. But it really does make you realize that, even within a continent that people like to believe is somewhat homogenized, or homogenizing, even the most simple thing of which, dinner, the last meal in the day, when do you eat it? It really does depend. 4 to 5 p.m. in Norway? What time are you going to bed over there? Or 9:30 to 10:30 over here in Spain? Because, yeah, there is a huge difference in the daylight received in, say, Sweden or Finland or Norway and between Spain and Portugal. And because the daylight differs and because the climate differs, it's way too hot to be eating outside at 5 p.m. I can tell you, I cannot, look at my skin tone and tell me that I could live somewhere in the south of Europe. No, it's terrible over there. I don't know how people live with it. Heat is just this exhausting fact of your day-to-day life. I guess you could say, the cold is an exhausting fact of your day-to-day life up north, but it's really terrifying to me that just yeah, the fact that things are so different here that lead to all of that, and the fact that that permeates into so many parts of their culture is also very interesting, right? The type of food you eat is different, early versus late. The way in which you eat the food, the way in which restaurants have to stay open longer because you're only going to be eating. In fact, it's different because in the South, restaurants are just only open from 6 p.m. onwards or something. And maybe I want to eat my food at 5. Maybe I want to eat a late lunch or whatever. But in a lot of parts of Europe, it's just really common to open a bit for lunch and then open from dinner till midnight or something. And it's But what if I want to eat somewhere else in the day, and that is a no-go unless you live, at least in the UK. I'm used to that being just open from one time to one time. But in Europe, they're just like, screw it, we're open when we feel like it. Deal with it. And that's another interesting difference there, because food defines a lot about our culture. And speaking of things that define a lot about our culture, this next map is so interesting also, because this is the birthplaces of the 100 fastest 10,000 meter runners of all time. As you can see, of the 100 runners, 3 were born in North America, 3 were born in Morocco, but the other 94 were all born in East Africa. I mean, you could argue, is this really East Africa, or is this Southeast Africa? But you get the point. They were all born, besides the, we'll say 93 of them, were all born within a 1,000-meter radius right over here. A lot of Ethiopian runners, a lot of Kenyan runners, and so why is that? In fact, actually, if you look at the runners, they're pretty evenly distributed, except right here where there's a huge number together. So many that you can tell they would be closer together, but the map physically can't separate them enough. So what is happening in this part of Africa? And wow, thank you for asking. The actual explanation is the tribe. So obviously, in African countries, there are lots more distinct people groups that were never integrated as closely together as they were in other continents. Integrated would be perhaps the most generous word, and maybe much worse words could be used. But because of this, there are distinct people groups of some form, whether that's just language, or whether that's even got something to do with ethnicity and to do with the very way in which the people are built. And so the Kalenjin people happen to line up quite well with this red set of dots. And so if we look into the Kalenjin people, definitely not saying it correctly, they're a southern Nilotic ethnic group indigenous to what was formerly the Rift Valley province in Kenya. As you can see, they live exclusively in Kenya, Uganda, and then there's some of them living in Tanzania and the USA, and we can learn a whole ton about them, and we can learn about the adoption of the practice of circumcision and the cyclical system of age organization, which I think we might just skip past for now, because instead, let's talk about how they're very good at sport. Do you see this female Kalenjin athlete, Mercy Chrono? You do see that. So one of the interesting things about this particular group of people is they are very, very good at sport. They've been called the running tribe by some. That feels like a bit of a Weasley word for Wikipedia. But anyway, since the 1960s, Kenyan men have earned the largest share of major honors in international athletics at distances from 800 meters to the marathon. The vast majority of these Kenyan running stars have been Kalenjin, because this region, there's a lot of theories by the way, but it's something to do with the fact that, like, yeah, their culture is built around it. They run to school every day. Like, what, you know, for a lot of people, running is the last resort. At least in Western countries, right? No, you run to school every day. Why wouldn't you? Why do we walk to school? Isn't that like a waste of time? If we ran everywhere, so many more things would be in walking distance, or should I say running distance. If it was normal to just like go for a little run around the city, we'd all get places faster and the world would be better. We'd all be fitter, would we not? They live at relatively high altitude, and also because of the relatively low GDP, all of those factors combined together with maybe their relatively thin legs to mean that the Kalenjin are a disproportionate collection of winners of races. Look at this blob right here. Of all the places in the world people could be born to be the fastest runners, they all happen to be born right over here. Isn't that fascinating? Yes, it is. Speaking of things that are fascinating, because we could do this all day. By the way, I looked into, I had to look it up because I was like, wait, isn't Usain Bolt the best sprinter in the world? He's the best sprinter in the world. There is a big difference between, obviously, 10,000 meters and 100 meters. It feels as though if you're good at running, you should be good at all forms of running. But again, there's an interesting difference there between long distance and short distance runners. Short distance runners are not generally from this same place. Even though there is a more disproportionate element there than you'd expect. Which again, so interesting that like, wait, so running 100 meters really is that different from running 10,000? Yes, it is. It's more about technique at 100 meters versus endurance and whatnot at 10,000. Anyway, speaking of things that are interesting, that aren't Usain Bolt, here are some other things you can do with your body if you live in Europe, or Nevada, it seems. So I want to talk about this because it kind of is related about like, oh yeah, so there are all sorts of things that are different culturally speaking, and this isn't just relating to should you run to school. It also relates to like, can you do the oldest profession in the world? And in Latvia, in Croatia, and in the majority of the United States, no, you cannot. In yellow countries, so Norway, Iceland, Sweden, and Ireland, and also France, you can buy it. Sorry, you can sell it So it's not, you're not going to legalize people for being the desperate, like selling it as a last resort thing, but you cannot buy it. If you are caught buying it, you have committed the crime. It's an interesting difference there. That like, wait, so it's not two people engaging in a transaction. It's one person doing what they've got to do and one person committing an illegal act. That's how they see it. Then there's partially legal countries like the UK where it's legal, but you can't have an establishment around it. You can't have next to McDonald's like, BJ's or Us or whatever. And then also we have green, which is completely legal, regulated and taxed, which is only Nevada, Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, I want to say, and Hungary, and then Greece and also Lithuania. That's so weird. If you look at the the Baltic nations, all three of them have a very different stance. And so what I would love to see, the thought-provoking bit about this to me, is I wonder if this really has an effect on how people see, whether it's sex itself, or whether people actually buy it less in countries where it's illegal versus countries where it is. If people are buying it more because it's legal, and it's taxed, etc., then are those countries safer? Are those countries, therefore implicitly allowing and encouraging it? Or are they just letting people do what they want to do? It's kind of an interesting difference there. And it's also so interesting that there's such a cultural difference just across the ocean. Countries that are both, wildly enough, we're both unfriendly, really unfriendly sets of people have such wildly different attitudes on something like this, minus Nevada, which obviously makes their whole state reputation on just allowing you to do basically whatever you want. Speaking of places where you can do whatever you want, this is the most interesting thing to me. By the way, did you know, I should mention this, in the city of Vegas, everyone thinks that like, oh, Vegas is the place where you can do all these things, because you always get cards. Like, you can't actually, Vegas is, I believe it's banned in Vegas. It's just the rest of the state where it's legal, regulated, and taxed. Just so you know, and you don't make your travel decisions based on this, which I hope you're not doing anyway. Make your travel decisions based on this, okay? Go to an unfriendly country today. Speaking of unfriendly places you should go, Chile and Mongolia. This is the direct and the shortest direct line path between Chile and Mongolia. So logically, when they build their railway, this is the path it would take. You might be thinking, no, Toycat, you made a mistake here. The shortest distance must be across there. Before I show you, by the way, I know this is my video and I can do what I want, but can I show you a map? I want to show you a map. This is the Stutthall farm. I've wanted to include this in a video forever, but I just haven't known where. This is a farm that is just in the middle of two there's the north or east and west branch for motorway. This one's going east, I want to say. This one's going west. I don't know which side of the road we drive on. But as you can see, this is a farm which is right in the middle, like an old schooly farm. And there's a lot of like urban myths about like, oh, well, the reason it's there is because they refused to sell their land for the motorway. Because think about it, all of this would have been farmland before a motorway came in here. But apparently, it's just not geologically okay land to build a motorway on, but it's perfectly fine to have a farm on, maybe? I don't understand how that's possible, but I feel as though this is going to be the weirdest, this is going to be the weirdest thing. And the crazy thing is, because it's a motorway, it's controlled access, because I'd figure like, well, it's nice because they have easy access to the motorway. They actually don't. If you want to get from this farm that is in between two motorway branches to the motorway, what you've got to do is like, I guess we've got to like... Actually, let's find out if we want to go to the Scaramondon Bridge right here. Oh no, that's a bridge over the motorway. Let's see how you get from there to there. You have to drive for 11 minutes to cover that much distance, which I think is beautiful, personally. It's not as far as you could have expected, but still, I think that's funny. That you might be connected to the motorway, but you're not really connected to the motorway. Speaking of things who aren't connected to the motorway, the final point I just wanted to say is, did you know the Earth is not flat? Some people will tell you that it is, but that's just what that's just what they want you to believe, because they are actually part of the New World Order, trying to convince you the world is flat so they can sell you. I don't know, what would flat earthers really even sell you more of? I guess they sell you fewer tickets to space. Anyway, speaking of things that you might... Probably more tickets to space, actually. If I was convinced the Earth was flat, I would find it to be so... Like, I would love to see the Earth from such a high point. And whenever I talk about flat Earth, I get a ton of comments being like, Toycat, Google Maps only pretends the Earth is a globe for the globalists, and it's like, yes, that is exactly what they believe. Anyway, speaking of things that people believe, this is the fastest path between Mongolia and between Chile, and it's because the Earth is actually curved. On a short enough distance, the shortest path between two places is usually pretty straight. I mean, you can see it bend a tiny bit over here, but it's pretty straight, right? However, because the Earth is a curved surface, all we have to do is hit I always forget how you change the Earth to be spherical on Google these days. There we go, as you can see. And now if we move one of these to Chile, you can start to see that, like, wait a minute. Yeah, there is a straight line path that just happens to go across the Earth like that. The weather's kind of ruining it for me, but as you can see, let's go back to default view. Let's just go with a nice default curved Earth and show you that, like, that's so interesting. And so that's, by the way, why Russia's airspace being closed is such a big deal. A lot of people think, like, well, let's just not fly over Russia. But, you know, if you want to fly from, say, the UK to Japan, which you can do, you gotta go over Russia. So if you're trying to avoid Russia, instead of a 9,500 kilometer route, it's, I don't know, what is that, like, a 13,000 kilometer route. You can probably do way less if you like. You come over here, and then, yeah, that's about what you can do. So it adds 2,000 kilometers, which, when you're a metal bird in the sky that consumes some dumb amount of oil, and oil is an expensive commodity, that adds a lot of cost, and that's why, I don't know, the Finnish national airline is basically shut down as far as long-haul flights going east go. Because, like, if you're Finland, getting anywhere is a pain. Like, you want to fly to Kazakhstan? Better fly around. You want to go to Japan? Ooh, yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. Better work it out. There you go. And so, yeah, long story short, the world is a complex place because it's not even a square or a flat plane. And speaking of flat planes, the only flat plane that you should be caring about is the one which has taken you to this video. Thank you for watching it. It was a second channel video though, so I don't really care. If you want to see more of these, then you never will. This could be the last. Goodbye.